Good morning. Thank you for joining me. I'm coming to you from Siloam Missionary Baptist Church, located in Rougemont, North Carolina, where the Reverend Wayne Johnson is pastor. I will be bringing you this morning the Sunday School lesson for November 6, 2022, which is entitled Obedience in Justice. The lesson text comes from Exodus chapter 23, verses 1 through 9, related scriptures, Deuteronomy chapter 19, verses 15 through 21, Proverbs chapter 6, verses 16 through 19, Isaiah chapter 10, verses 1 through 4, Jeremiah chapter 5, verses 25 through 29, and Mark chapter 14, verses 55 through 59. My name is Charlotte Timberlake. The scripture lesson text will be coming from Exodus chapter 23, verses 1 through 9, and it reads, Thou shalt not raise a false report. Put not thine hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness. Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil, neither shalt thou speak in a cause to decline after many to wrest judgment. Neither shalt thou countenance a poor man in his cause. If thou meet thine enemy's ox or his ass going astray, thou shalt surely bring it back to him again. If thou see the ass of him that hateth thee lying under his burden, and wouldest forbear to help him, thou shalt surely help with him. Thou shalt not wrest the judgment of thy poor in his cause. Keep thee far from a false matter, and the innocent and righteous slay thou not, for I will not justify the wicked. And thou shalt take no gift, for the gift blinded the wise, and perverted the words of the righteous. Also thou shalt not oppress a stranger, for ye know the heart of a stranger, seeing ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. May the Lord add a blessing to the reading of his word. Golden text. Keep thee far from a false matter, and the innocent and righteous slay thou not, for I will not justify the wicked. Exodus chapter 23, verse 7. Today's lesson aim. Facts. To see that God gave Israel a set of laws and regulations by which to live. The laws concerning testimonies and speech reveal the need for honesty and compassion. Principle. To show that God expects his people to deal honestly with other people. Application. To learn that by obeying God's commandments, we will treat others with honesty and justice. Introducing the lesson. God requires justice and compassion. In our interactions, we are to be honest, we are to avoid favoritism, and we are to treat enemies fairly. Developing the lesson. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 16, God gave the prohibition against bearing false witness against a neighbor. Our lesson passage expands on this command. Number 1, prohibition against a conspiracy of lies. Exodus chapter 23, verses 1 through 2. God gave a prohibition against joining with others to commit an injustice. The first statement prohibits spreading a false testimony or, quote, false report, end quote. This is more than a simple spur-of-the-moment lie. What is in view is an intentional falsehood designed to defraud someone else. Moses also wrote that it was forbidden to join with a, quote, multitude, end quote, verse 2, in carrying out evil. It is forbidden to join in popular causes that strip away justice from others. Number 2, prohibition against favoritism toward the poor. Exodus chapter 23, verse 3. There is an inherent danger in taking up the cause of the poor in a legal dispute. People tend to cheer for the underdog. In any dispute, if the poor are shown favoritism, an injustice is being committed against their opponents. Compassion is no excuse for injustice. 3. Command to restore an opponent's animal. Exodus chapter 23, verses 4 through 5. The next prohibition shows that we are our brother's keeper. In this case, a person stumbles upon a stray animal that he discovers belongs to his enemy. It would be easy for him not to see his enemy's welfare as his concern. In fact, he could weaken his enemy's wealth by letting the animal wander. The right action is to restore the animal to its owner regardless of his identity. Number 4, command for justice for the poor. Exodus chapter 23, verse 6. The poor must receive justice. It is wrong to show partiality toward them, but it is equally wrong to show prejudice against them. Number 5, prohibition against false judgment. Exodus chapter 23, verse 7. The phrase, quote, false matter, end quote, means literally, quote, a deceptive word, end quote. Misleading testimony could result in the death of an innocent individual. Number 6, prohibition against bribes. Exodus chapter 23, verse 8. God prohibited the use of bribes, which pervert justice. And number 7, proper treatment of strangers. Exodus chapter 23, verse 9. Finally, God prohibited the oppression of strangers, those who are newcomers or sojourners. I will now go over the questions in the back of the lesson. Question number 1. What harm can result from yielding to peer pressure and following the views of the majority? The answer, following the crowd is especially bad because it hurts the innocent. In addition, in perverting justice, it dishonors the name of our righteous God. Question number 2, how can we resist following the opinions of the crowd? The answer, only those who have developed the inner fortitude and mastered the divine standards to do right can resist the pressure to conform to unjust ways. Question number 3, are the poor to be shown favor over the rich? Explain. The answer, we might sympathize with the poor man who steals food to feed his wife and children, but he is just as guilty of thievery as a wealthy thief. The law must not have a double standard for rich and poor. Question number 4. What is God's method of dealing with enemies? The answer, it would be easy to return evil for evil, to say that the enemy deserved to lose his animal for his nasty behavior and that he should therefore have to go find it on his own. But this is not God's way of dealing with enemies. He sets an example for us by sending his blessings on the just and unjust alike. Matthew chapter 5, verses 44 through 45. And he sent his son to die for us and provide salvation, quote, while we were yet sinners, end quote. Romans chapter 5, verse 8. We are therefore commanded to love our enemies. Question number 5. What good can result from helping an enemy in a hard situation? The answer: this would display compassion. It would help diffuse any bad feelings the other man had toward him. His kindness would take away any grounds his enemy may have had for hating him. Question number 6. Why are political officials inclined to side with the rich? The answer: those who serve as local officials are usually themselves prominent members of the community, so it is easy for them to identify with others of the same social class and to take their side. Question number 7. Was oppression of the poor a problem in Israel? How do we know? The answer: the Lord expressed himself forcefully and repeatedly concerning his care for the poor in Israel. Cross-reference Leviticus chapter 19, verses 9 through 10, and Deuteronomy chapter 15, verses 7 through 11. Yet his commands were repeatedly violated, as is evident from the denunciations of the prophets. Cross-reference Isaiah chapter 3, verses 14 through 15, Amos chapter 2, verse 6, and chapter 5, verse 11 through 12, and chapter 8, verse 4. Question number 8. How will God deal with those who condemn the innocent? The answer: God judges all things perfectly, and he will not allow the wicked to escape justice. He will hold accountable the real criminals in the case, regardless of the decision of a human tribunal. He will also punish the unjust judges who perpetrated this miscarriage of justice. Question number 9. Why does Scripture so strongly condemn the practice of bribery? The answer: bribery is one of the most common forms of political corruption. Scripture condemns it repeatedly, for it makes a mockery of justice. And question number 10. What special favors were Israelites to give to resident aliens? The answer: numerous times Scripture classifies, quote, strangers, end quote, with widows and orphans as those needing special consideration. They were to be treated fairly in court. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 16, and chapter 24, verse 17, and cared for in their poverty. Leviticus chapter 25, verse 35. They were to have access to the cities of refuge. Numbers chapter 35, verse 15, and to be included in the celebration of festivals. Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 11 and verse 14. Grain was to be left for them in the fields at harvest time. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 10, and chapter 23, verse 22. Here are the practical points for the lesson. Number 1, whether in a courtroom or in everyday life, we must always speak the truth at all cost. Exodus chapter 23, verse 1. Number 2, shading the truth for a popular cause may be tempting but must be avoided. Verses 2 through 3. Number 3, lending a hand to an enemy may be the last thing we want to do, but we must if we love God. Verses 4 through 5. Number 4, if we get someone in trouble through lies and deceit, we will be in big trouble ourselves with God. Verses 6 through 7. And number 5, bribery and oppression have no place among the people of God. Verses 8 through 9. Summary: God's instructions are clear. His people are to practice truth, justice, and mercy. In order to practice justice, a person must not only avoid wrong actions, but also show compassion to those in genuine need. This will conclude the lesson for this morning. Thank you for listening. May the Lord fill your week with love and laughter.